From Hollywood, welcome to Starlight Mystery Theater and another episode in the series, Matthew Slade, Private Investigator. We invite you to take your seat as Matthew Slade unfolds a sweet scent of mystery.
In my job, the hours are odd. So are the circumstances and the people I meet. You could even call some of them dangerous. My calling card reads, Matthew Slade, Private Investigator. This case began at a small social gathering I attended at the home of a prominent lawyer. I just completed some legal dog tracking for him, and we were celebrating his success in court. I was about to seek temporary refuge on the terrace from the noisy, smoke-filled room when I was suddenly enveloped by the sweet scent of a heavy perfume. I turned, was confronted by an attractive woman. She was a good deal older than she appeared. Her slender figure was enhanced by a simple black dress. She possessed delicate features, large blue eyes, her face framed in a halo of soft blonde hair. She looked at me in frank amusement at my quick appraisal.
I hope you're not planning to visit our cozy little group, Mr. Slade. I've been trying to get over to meet you all evening, and now you're running out. Is that fair?
Just stepping out for some fresh air.
It is rather stuffy in here. Mind if I join you?
I'd be delighted. After you?
Thank you.
Cigarette.
Thank you.
You have a distinct advantage over me.
Oh?
Well, you know who I am, but
forgive me. My name is Grace Burroughs.
Well, my pleasure, Mrs. Burroughs.
Are you married?
Well, I was born and raised a bachelor.
I thought so. I'm beginning to think only the weaklings fall prey to that unhappy misfortune called matrimony. The weak ones do it only because they think they need someone to lean on. I married one. Fortunately, I found my way clear to correcting that mistake. However, my daughter Laurie made the same mistake. And now? Now it's cost her life.
I don't quite understand.
My daughter Laurie Thompson was killed when her house burned in Belvedere almost a month ago.
I remember reading about that in the papers. That's an unfortunate accident.
It was no accident, Mrs. Slade. My daughter was murdered.
Well, I can understand your grief, Mrs. Burroughs, but
I know what you're thinking, but you're wrong. I have proof.
Would you care to tell me about it?
Yes. The police said if the screen hadn't been properly closed and that a spark set the carpet ablaze. But that's not it at all.
Oh, go on.
Since childhood, Laurie's been deathly afraid of fire. The fireplace would not have been in use at all unless someone had been with her.
And there was no evidence of anyone else being there?
None at all.
Well, what about her husband?
Bob? He didn't turn up until the next morning. It seems he spent the greater part of the evening at a bar called the Drift Inn. He was drunk as usual. At least he had sense enough not to drive. He slept it off in the car in the parking lot. The bartender verified his story.
Now, did you tell the police about this fear your daughter had?
Yes. Oh, they made a feeble attempt at an investigation. And that's why when I saw you here tonight, I decided to ask you for your help.
Well, I don't know that I'd be able to find much more than the police, Mrs. Burroughs, especially at this late date. Have you thought of the possibility of suicide?
Definitely not. Laurie was strong-willed. No matter how difficult the situation may have been, she would never have taken the easy way out.
Was there a difficult situation?
Oh, yes, I'm afraid there was.
I see. Tell me about it.
My son-in-law was nothing before he married Laurie. First, Bob resisted the idea of living off Laurie's income. But when his efforts to find a job failed, he slowly succumbed to the inevitable and turned to drinking for his solace. When Laurie reached the age of 30, less than a year ago that was, she received a sizable inheritance in addition to a monthly allowance from the trust. Bob wanted to use it to start his own business. Oh, some foolish idea of selling foreign sport cars. I was against it. As I had anticipated, within 6 months the business folded. He wanted more money to try again, but Laurie wouldn't give it to him. He even threatened to leave her because of it. That was 2 months ago. He's been drunk ever since.
Where is he living now?
Oh, in some rented apartment at the Shoreline Motel, I think it's called, on Highway 101. I understand he spends most of his time at the Drift Inn bar.
Could anyone else have paid Laurie a visit that evening?
My daughter was not in the habit of keeping company with other men.
I understand some women still consider other women as friends.
I'm very sorry. It's just that... Well, never mind. Laurie had many friends. None of them were as close to her as her sister Patricia. Pat was with me that evening.
Well, there doesn't appear much for me to go on.
Will you try and find the truth for me?
All right. I'll start tomorrow. Now, I'd better take you inside before you catch cold. Then I'll find our host and say goodnight.
I think I'll stay out here just a while longer.
All right.
Good night and thank you.
I'll be in touch, Mrs. Burroughs. On the way home, I went over in my mind a few facts Mrs. Burroughs had given me. Few indeed. I suspected there was a lot more to this than she wished me to believe. Since she seemed so convinced her daughter was murdered, I was sure she had a prime suspect in mind. But she wasn't about to tell, not yet anyway. I wondered why she had so quickly come to the defense of her daughter's morals. Certainly the police had asked her the same questions. Evidently, she'd had time to think about them. And maybe, just maybe, she had a few answers she didn't like. I was determined to find out what they were. And the most likely source would be Bob Thompson. The next morning, I had Jonesy wade through the society columns of back issues at the newspaper morgue. I went over the fire report at police headquarters. It stated no more than I had expected. A neighbor reported the fire. By the time the department got there was little they could do. A routine investigation was made. A few tangible remains were found identifying the woman's body. A silver locket, brass buckles from a pair of slippers, and a diamond wedding ring. I phoned Jonesy at the office, found that her investigation had been almost as fruitless as mine. Lori Thompson was at the top of the social register. She was active in numerous charity organizations, and because of her beauty, a favorite subject of the society photographers. The stories were all along those lines. No gossip, no scandals. She was typically top drawer. I drove out to the Shoreline Motel. Thompson wasn't there. Hadn't been since the previous night. My next stop, the Drift Inn. I entered the dimly lit barroom. There were several customers, but I was able to pick out Bob Thompson at first glance. He sat hulked over the bar. Bob Thompson?
Who are you?
Are you Bob Thompson?
Last time I looked, yeah.
Is there somewhere we can talk?
Talk about what?
Your wife?
I haven't got a wife. This has been my wife. Keeps me happy, gives me courage, and it's always there when I need it.
You may be right, but nonetheless, I want to talk about your wife, Lori, not about the whiskey.
Who are you?
Matthew Slade, private investigator.
Private eye. I thought you people only existed in pulp books.
Oh, no, some of us are for real. I want to make a few inquiries concerning your wife's accident.
Oh, his accident? What for? She's dead. She's gone. Now, what difference does it make now?
Well, the difference between an accident, suicide, or murder.
What are you talking about? Oh, now I get it. Grace, you've been talking to her mother. I suppose she told you I killed Lori.
No, she didn't.
She will. She told me right to my face. You killed her. She said, I'll make you pay. I expect she figured out a way to blame you. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. Lori's gone. There's nothing left for me anyway.
Yeah, well, all I want to know is where you were the night of Lori's death.
I was here. I'm always here. Once in her life, she needed me, and I wasn't there to help. But I loved her, Slade. Can you believe that? She was perfect. No matter how rotten I got, she continued to love me. And maybe she'd just gotten mad at me once or blown up at me. I might have had the guts to get out and do something about it, make something of myself. And, you know, she never cheated on me. She wouldn't even let me serve as a good excuse for that.
You started a business a couple months ago, didn't you?
Yeah, with Lori's money. I couldn't even do that without her. I was doing pretty good, too.
The night of the fire.
I spent the day on the beach. I went home for dinner, and I came here. And that's it. I always end up here.
Did you have an argument?
I never argued. Nothing to argue about. And she was too perfect. I was too weak.
Was she expecting anyone that night?
Not that I know of. She would have told me.
Did she seem worried or preoccupied with anything?
Lori never worried about anything. I don't know what you're getting at, Slade. Maybe you'd better explain it.
Yeah, well, I'm not quite sure myself. When you left her that night, did Lori have a fire going?
I don't remember, but I doubt it. She didn't like to have a fire unless I was there to attend to it. Slade?
Yes?
No matter what Grace has up her sleeve, you can't accuse me of killing Lori. You see, I got the best alibi in the world.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
I'm too much of a coward.
At least I'd learned something this morning. Grace Burroughs did have a suspect in mind. I was convinced she was wrong. Thompson was no murderer. I got back to the office in time for lunch and found Jonesy amidst a stack of old newspaper clippings. She was munching on a hamburger.
Well, homeward comes my dashing hero.
What's this? Food for the soul as well as the body?
Very funny. You just don't realize how hard I work around here.
Well, tell me, have you found anything tarnishing on our golden girl?
Well, there is something that struck me as rather odd.
Oh, what's that, pray tell?
Well, if you were a society belle like Lorraine Thompson and you went to lots of balls and gala affairs, would you like having your little sister tagging along all the time? And if you were the little sister, wouldn't you feel like a fifth wheel?
Well, yes, I suppose so. Now, what are you getting at?
If you were that little sister, wouldn't you try to get your own dates and make it a foursome?
All right. I'll play your little game. Now, what's the next clue?
It's just that in all these reports and pictures, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson are accompanied by Lorraine's younger sister, Patricia. Matt, it's odd that a girl like Patricia Burroughs doesn't have at least one young man interested in her. Yet in all these pictures, she's alone. There's got to be some reason, and my guess is she's quite happy just being a tag-along. Because she's in love with Thompson.
Oh, Jonesy.
But look, Matt, just look. In every one of these pictures, Patricia is looking at Bob like a lovesick cat.
Oh, now, come on, sweetheart. You're an incurable romantic.
No, just a lot wiser about the ways of women than you seem to be. And I'd be willing to bet 1 week's pay that I'm right.
All right, Jonesy. I promise to keep that in mind when I talk to her.
Where are you going?
Well, to see Patricia Burroughs. The Burroughs home, located in Forest Hills, was a southern colonial, surrounded by spacious, tree-shaded grounds. I was greeted at the door by a uniformed butler and shown to a richly furnished library where I was told to await Mrs. Burroughs. A few moments later, she appeared, preceded by that familiar heavy wave of perfume.
Have you brought news?
Not exactly, but I would like to talk with your daughter.
Mrs. Slade.
Yes?
Maybe I'm just getting cold feet, but everyone seems to think I'm making a big thing of this, possibly with the point of making a complete fool of myself.
Just who is everyone?
Well, William, for one. He seems to think it's...
William? Excuse me, who's William?
William Jennings. He's been a family friend for years. I value his advice.
He advises that you discontinue the investigation?
Yes. He feels that even if Laurie was murdered, there's nothing we can do about it now. The police are satisfied it was an accident, and there'd be such unfavorable publicity.
Mrs. Burroughs, at the moment, I can't be positive that your daughter was murdered. I don't even have a good suspect. But I'm curious enough now to continue the investigation, to find out the truth.
You were right, Mr. Slade. I too want to know the truth, no matter what you may find. Anything will be better than not knowing, never being sure.
Well, I can assure you that everything will be done quietly. And now, if I may, talk with Patricia.
Of course. I'll have Malcolm show you the way to the pool.
Patricia Burroughs was sunning herself beside an Olympic-sized pool. My nostrils picked up the aroma of the same perfume worn by her mother. She looked about 21, 5'2", I guess about 98 pounds. And she was cute. Very cute. Miss Burroughs.
Patch to you, Mr. Slade. I've been wondering when you'd get around to me. Please sit down.
Had I known what I'd be getting around to, I would have made it sooner.
Flattery will get you everywhere. Now, what are we going to talk about?
Your sister. Tell me, was she unhappy with her marriage?
Well, she and Bob could have had more of an exciting life if she just let herself go. But she felt Bob needed the quiet life. If you asked me, it was the other way around.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
Well, Laurie was afraid of life. She used Bob as an excuse to shy away from really digging in and enjoying it.
Was she in love with him?
In a way, I suppose. But it wasn't the kind he needed. She was more like a mother than a wife. As an outside observer, Mr. Slade, one often sees more than the participant.
As an outside observer, I'd say you were in love with him. The more I got into this case, the less sense it made. I had long since discarded my first thoughts that Lorraine Thompson committed suicide. She was too sensible and well-adjusted for that. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe I was on a wild goose chase. Nevertheless, with her fetish about fire, someone must have been with her that night. But who? And if so, why didn't that someone try to help her? Or come forward with an explanation? I was right back where I started. The suspects were fading in and out like a fast-action B-movie. I was convinced that Bob Thompson was innocent. Patricia was admittedly in love with her sister's husband, but I doubted that she'd killed because of it. Then there was William Jennings. If he was in love with Laurie, then where was his motive for murder? Had she been seeing him on the sly? The possibilities were endless. But it all added up to a big fat zero. After a sleepless night of wrestling with my theories, I showered, dressed, and headed for the office.
Good morning, boss.
Well, good morning, sleeping beauty.
I'm putting in for overtime.
Oh.
I spent all afternoon and half the night checking on William Jennings.
Well, you just didn't have to go to all that trouble, sweetheart.
I thought you might like to have it first thing. Here's what I found. It's all typed out.
Well, thanks.
Oh, and one other thing, Matt.
Oh, yeah?
I called Mr. Jennings' office this morning. His secretary said he was leaving for Los Angeles today. On his honeymoon.
Get me a seat on that noon plane to L.A., sweetheart.
Haven't you heard? 3 o'clock.
No, it can't be helped. I've got some questions that won't wait for answers, and you can drive me to the airport. I'll even buy you lunch before I leave.
A real, honest-to-goodness lunch?
How's about something like, a filet?
You just bought yourself a chauffeur, mister.
Airlines, Flight 12, departing for Seattle, Gate 9. West Coast Airlines, Flight 417, departing for Los Angeles, Gate 7. Final call, all aboard, please.
A quick check with the airline gave me Jennings' Hotel, the Sunset Palms, a typical Hollywood facade surrounded by a few palm trees and concrete landscaping. I entered the glass-enclosed lobby, went to the desk, slipped a blank sheet of paper into an envelope, addressed it to Jennings, and watched the clerk place it in box 303. I made my way around the crowded poolside to the elevator, and minutes later, located Jennings' room on the 3rd floor.
Who is it?
Matthew Slade. I'd like to talk to you.
I don't know anyone by that name. You must have the wrong room.
Or maybe you know more about the name Lorraine Thompson.
Now, look here. I don't know who you are or what business you have concerning Lorraine, but I happen to be on my honeymoon.
I'm well aware of the fact that you not only know who I am, but that I'm working for Grace Burroughs to investigate her daughter's death. Let's talk about it.
Come in. My wife knows nothing of my acquaintance with Lorraine. She's in the next room.
You and Lorraine Thompson were very good friends.
I've known her since we were children.
Were you in love with her?
I suppose our relationship could have been misconstrued by some people.
When did you see her last?
The night of the death. She called me. Anyway, she wanted my advice.
So you went over, right?
I arrived about an hour after her call, about 9:30, but she wasn't there. I waited around for a while, then I went home.
Were you curious as to where she might have gone?
I'd suppose she'd gone for another one of her therapy drives. That was her pet name for it. Whenever she had a problem, she'd get in her car and just drive.
Yesterday, Grace Burroughs told me that you had advised her against continuing the investigation. Why?
I thought the publicity would do her a great deal of damage.
Are you sure you weren't trying to hide something?
Now, look here. I've been more than generous in humoring you and your insinuations. I've told you all I know. And if you don't mind, I'd appreciate you leaving.
I could turn you into the police for withholding evidence, but I guess I'm just a romanticist at heart. You know, your honeymoon and all that. Besides, I think you've forgotten a few things. And you may want to tell me them later. Adios. The heavy wave of perfume so familiar to Mrs. Burroughs and to her daughter Pat was much in evidence in room 303 of the Sunset Palms. I was about to calculate my next move when... Within seconds, I ran down the corridor and forced my way into the room. Jennings had his back to me, clutching the woman by the throat. Her arms were around his neck in a grotesque embrace, hands grasping wildly, vainly searching for some vital target. I spun him around, and I hit him with a well-placed right hook. He went down and out. Lorraine Thompson stood holding onto a nearby chair for support. Her dark, silky hair hung tousled about her shoulders, her eyes desperately fighting to comprehend the past few moments. I called the police.
Oh, Mr. Slade, he tried to kill. It was horrible.
It's over now. I sit down over here. There. Now, you feel up to telling me about it?
Well, Bill and I have been seeing each other for some time. I finally realized that I didn't love my husband. I pitied him. Tried to mother him. I could see it was only making him weaker, more dependent, but I couldn't just leave him. The night of the fire, Bob and I had an argument. He wanted more money for his business. I was so confused, I called Bill for his advice. Then I decided to make the decision on my own. I went for one of my therapy drives. The rest of the story is like a horrible dream.
Go on.
I wasn't paying attention to the road. I'd driven it 1,000 times. Suddenly there was a woman crossing the road. I was going too fast. I couldn't stop. I tried to swerve. The woman just stood there. The car went out of control, and I hit her. When I finally managed to stop the car, I went back. She seemed to be alive, so I put her in the back seat of the car and drove home where Bill was waiting for me. He helped me get the woman into the house, and I was about to call the doctor when Bill said she was dead. I panicked. He said it was our chance to get away together and for me to get out of the murder charge.
Bill put my ring on the woman's finger and a few other things for identification, then started the fire. He drove me to the airport, and I flew down here. I realized what a terrible thing I had done, but Bill bolstered my courage. Then he wanted to draw my savings out of the bank and fly to Mexico. Yesterday, I decided to give the money to Bob. I thought it might be of some consolation to him. He'd be better off without me anyway. When I told Bill what I planned to do, he became furious. Then you showed up. Bill got frightened, wanted to leave for Mexico today. I told him I couldn't go on. It would be best if we gave ourselves up. He suddenly became enraged. He said I could stay, but he wanted the money. He tried to kill me. What will happen to us, Mr. Slade?
Well, you'll have to go back and face charges for the accident. And if what you told me is true, Bill Jennings will be charged with conspiracy. Possible murder.
Oh, no.
Well, chances are the woman wasn't dead. In which case, technically he or both of you killed her.
I never would have guessed it, Matt. I had all my money riding on dear little sister.
Well, you can't be right all the time. Besides, you were the one who put me onto the scent with your hunch about Patricia. It was she who gave me the first clue. Oh, that reminds me. I picked up a little consolation prize for you. Here.
Oh.
Open it. Go ahead.
Perfume. Thank you.
Wear it around the office. I kind of got used to it on this case.
Oh, Matt.
This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.